The arena was alive with the roar of the crowd, a living, breathing entity of judgment and excitement. Flags flapped violently in the wind, banners of champions and nobles stretching from the stone walls that circled the field like a cage. Today was the day of the great gift exchange, an event designed to showcase skill, wealth, and power. But for Elias, a human mechanic from a small, forgotten village, it was a battlefield of ridicule. He stepped forward, clutching his tool satchel and wiping the sweat from his brow. Around him, the air shimmered with the stench of arrogance. Elite warriors, mages, and beast-tamers flaunted their offerings, dragons with scales like molten gold, creatures that sparkled with elemental fire, wings that spanned 20 feet, tails that could crush stone pillars. And then there was him. The prize they had given Elias was pitiful. A pale, albino dragon, small and frail, wings twisted like torn parchment, and eyes clouded with pain and fear. Her body bore scars that told a story of failure, a life beaten down by cruelty or accident, no one knew which. She looked at the crowd with hollow, wary eyes, and then at Elias, as if asking silently why anyone would want her. The laughter hit first, a cruel, cutting sound that spread like wildfire. "They gave him a crippled dragon," someone shouted from the stands. "What is he going to do with that?" "Maybe she'll die before she even learns to fly," another added. Elias felt the heat rise in his chest, but it wasn't anger, it was focus. He studied her carefully, noticing the subtle curves in her wings, the tense alignment of her spine, the faint tremor in her legs. Every flaw, to anyone else, screamed uselessness. But to him, it was a blueprint waiting to be understood, a puzzle that dared him to try. He knelt beside the dragon and extended a hand. She flinched but didn't pull away. That alone was a start. Elias whispered softly, words meant only for her. "Don't worry. I see you. I know what you can be." The crowd's laughter intensified, mocking the human's gesture. "Look at him," a noblewoman jeered. "He actually thinks he can fix that thing." But Elias didn't flinch. Every eye in the arena was on him, weighing his worth, doubting him, enjoying the spectacle of his supposed failure. And yet, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, the thrill of a challenge. Not just any challenge, but one that no one else dared face. He unpacked his tools, simple mechanical instruments that looked laughably inadequate next to the magical artifacts others carried. A hammer here, a pulley there, a few belts of reinforced metal. Every item was ordinary to the untrained eye. But Elias knew their potential. He had spent years learning, experimenting, pushing the limits of human ingenuity. And now, all that knowledge would be tested on the dragon before him. The dragon, whom he quietly named Leora, tilted her head and observed him. She didn't trust him, not yet, but there was curiosity in her gaze, the faintest spark of life that hadn't been snuffed out. Elias met her eyes, and in that instant a silent agreement formed. They would face this mockery together. Around them, the jeers continued, but Elias's mind was elsewhere. He was already seeing the first steps of their plan, how to strengthen her wings, realign her spine, restore balance. Others saw only a broken creature, but he saw motion, potential, and the promise of flight. For the first time that day, the world narrowed to just the two of them, human and dragon, outcasts standing on the edge of ridicule, ready to challenge fate itself. And deep in the back of the arena, a few of the more powerful spectators leaned closer, sensing that perhaps this human was not as powerless as everyone assumed. Because sometimes the smallest spark, even in a broken albino dragon, could ignite a fire that no one would forget. The morning after the humiliating presentation, the arena buzzed with speculation. Nobles whispered in corners, merchants stopped their carts to watch the human with the crippled dragon, and other competitors openly mocked him again. No one could understand why Elias hadn't fled, why he didn't hang his head in shame or abandon the absurd task of trying to repair a creature everyone had declared worthless. Elias, however, was unfazed. He rose early, long before the sun's first rays stretched across the arena walls. He carried Leora to the edge of the training grounds, away from prying eyes and derisive laughter. The dragon's wings quivered as she followed him, each movement cautious, tentative, as if she knew she would be tested. "Today," Elias whispered, "we begin, step by step." He knelt beside her, inspecting the delicate membranes of her wings. The cracks were deeper than he had hoped, the joints stiff and brittle. Yet in those fragile layers he saw patterns, lines of tension that could be realigned, muscles that could be retrained, bones that could be reinforced. What others saw as irreparable, he saw as a blueprint for possibility. The challenge wasn't just mechanical, it was psychological. Leora had been mocked, beaten, and abandoned. Her fear of falling, of failing, was as real as the physical damage. Elias spent hours coaxing her forward, gentle words, soft touches, patience stretching beyond normal human endurance. He spoke to her in whispers, describing the sky not as a limit, but as a home waiting for her. Meanwhile, word of Elias's persistence spread through the arena. Crowds gathered at the edges of the training grounds, curious at first, then skeptical, then cautious. A few competitors approached, smirks frozen, ready to deliver cutting remarks. One of the more arrogant beast-tamers laughed loudly. "The human actually thinks he can teach that cripple to fly. Do you need a ladder for that, human?" Elias looked up, his face calm but unyielding. "No ladder," he said, voice steady. "Just focus, precision, and patience. Something you'll never understand." The taunts drew more attention than he wanted, but he didn't flinch. Every mocker, every whisper of doubt, became fuel. They assumed failure was inevitable. They assumed humans were weak. Elias knew humans could surpass expectation, if they dared to challenge what others deemed impossible. Hours passed. Leora slowly shifted her weight, flexing muscles that had forgotten how to move. Elias's fingers adjusted tension straps, pulleys, and braces, ensuring each movement was perfectly balanced. He hummed quietly, a rhythm to guide her, a connection that no one could see but both of them understood. By midday, Leora lifted a foreleg and then the other, her head tilting skyward as if testing gravity. Elias encouraged her softly, hand on her back. The crowd outside murmured, some incredulous, some curious. The dragon, once mocked as useless, had begun to respond. Movement followed thought, instinct followed guidance, and fear began to fade, replaced by tentative courage. "This is only the beginning," Elias said aloud, though his words were meant for her. "We will not just survive. We will thrive. They'll remember this day not because of their laughter, but because we dared where they never would." From the stands, a few sharp-eyed spectators began to sense the shift. What had seemed like a spectacle of failure now carried a tension unlike anything they had anticipated. The human and the dragon moved in silent synchronization, a partnership forming stronger than steel. As the sun climbed higher, Elias finally allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The path ahead was still long and dangerous, full of ridicule and obstacles, but for the first time the challenge seemed real, conquerable, even inevitable. And in Leora's amber eyes there was a spark now, tiny but undeniable, the spark of hope, of trust, of a future she could not yet imagine. The arena had laughed at them yesterday. Today, the challenge had begun. Night had fallen over the arena, draping the grounds in shadow and silence. Most of the competitors had returned to their quarters. Their laughter and jeers faded into the night. But Elias and Leora remained, a human and a crippled dragon, working in tandem beneath a canopy of stars. The moonlight glinted off his tools, casting long, precise shadows on the dragon's pale scales. This was the secret work, the labor no one would witness, the stage no crowd would see. Here, failure and patience walked hand in hand, and every small success was a victory that no one would cheer for. Elias opened his satchel and laid out his instruments: pulleys, braces, reinforced alloy strips, and a set of intricate wing harnesses he had designed himself. To the untrained eye, they looked like scraps of metal and leather, nothing compared to the gilded talons and magic-infused chains others wielded. Yet Elias had spent years perfecting this craft. He knew every nuance of dragon anatomy, every way bones could be supported, every method of strengthening fragile joints without risking further injury. Tonight, he would apply all of it to Leora. He began with her wings, the most critical yet most damaged part of her body. Her left wing drooped awkwardly, the membranes torn and stiff. He examined the bones carefully, noting microfractures invisible to casual observation. Then, using a lightweight alloy brace, he aligned the wing, securing it with delicate precision. Leora hissed softly, a sound of discomfort and fear, but she did not resist. Elias murmured soothingly, "Trust me. I won't let you fall." Next came the spine, weak and unstable from years of neglect. Elias crafted a flexible support system, using pulleys and counterweights to relieve strain as she moved. Each adjustment required careful calibration. A fraction of a degree could mean injury. 4 hours he worked, sweat dripping from his brow, hands steady and sure, his mind calculating balance, tension, and movement as though performing an intricate dance. But the secret work wasn't just mechanical. Leora's mind had been broken by ridicule and abandonment, and Elias knew that trust had to be rebuilt. He spent hours speaking to her softly, telling her about the sky, about flight, about freedom she had never known. At first, she flinched at his touch, recoiling from even the lightest brush of a hand. Slowly, though, she began to relax, leaning into his guidance, testing the boundaries of trust. He fed her small meals, massaged her sore muscles, and encouraged her to take tiny steps, then slightly larger ones. Every flinch and hesitation was met with patience, every shiver of fear met with calm reassurance. By midnight, Leora was stretching her wings fully for the first time, letting them quiver in the night breeze. It was a small victory, almost imperceptible, but Elias recognized it immediately, the first sign of real progress. Hours passed unnoticed. The moon climbed high, casting silver light across the arena, and Elias continued tirelessly. He adjusted pulleys, realigned braces, and strengthened muscles that had long been dormant. Each minor improvement was a step closer to flight, each spark of trust a step closer to her becoming the creature she was meant to be. By the time the first hints of dawn painted the horizon, Leora had moved with a coordination that no one outside would have thought possible. She lifted her head proudly, flexed her wings, and met Elias's gaze. In that silent moment, words were unnecessary. They had formed a bond stronger than any mocking voice, a connection forged in sweat, patience, and relentless determination. And in that quiet pre-dawn, Elias allowed himself a small smile. The real work had begun. No longer was Leora a crippled dragon. She was a project, a challenge, a creature with potential waiting to be unlocked. Together, human and dragon, they were no longer subjects of ridicule. They were a force quietly gathering strength in the shadows, preparing to defy every expectation the world had placed upon them. The secret work was far from over, but for the first time, Elias could feel the promise of what they could achieve. The arena was crowded again, this time with anticipation, curiosity, and a lingering undercurrent of doubt. Word had spread through the city that the human mechanic, Elias, was still working on the crippled albino dragon, Leora. Some came for amusement, expecting failure. Others came out of curiosity, wondering if perhaps, against all odds, the human had achieved something remarkable. Elias stood at the edge of the launch platform, a makeshift structure of wood and metal that barely seemed strong enough to hold a dragon, yet was perfectly aligned for what he intended. Leora crouched beside him, wings tucked tightly against her sides, eyes scanning the crowd nervously. Her tail flicked uneasily. She had been trained, strengthened, and rebuilt, but the sky was still a vast, terrifying unknown. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. "She'll never fly," someone shouted. "Look at her, she's crippled." Another voice sneered. "The human can try all he wants, but she'll collapse before leaving the platform." Elias ignored them, his attention focused entirely on Leora. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on the side of her neck. "You've come so far," he whispered, his voice steady despite the tension in the arena. "Now it's your turn. Trust yourself. Trust me. Fly." For a long moment, Leora remained still, her amber eyes fixed on the endless sky above. Then, slowly, she lifted her head, testing the wind with a tentative inhale. Her wings twitched, then stretched, feeling the tension and balance that Elias had painstakingly crafted. Muscles flexed for the first time in years, bones supported by braces and pulleys, nerves responding with precision. The crowd leaned forward as she stepped to the edge of the platform. The jeers were almost deafening now, a mix of doubt and ridicule. But Elias remained silent, hand outstretched, heart steady. He had trained her to hear him, to feel his presence even in the chaos around them. Then a shiver ran through Leora. She lifted one wing, then the other, testing their strength. The sun caught the faint shimmer of her pale scales, and for a moment she looked more like a spectre than a living creature, fragile, ethereal, yet poised on the brink of transformation. Elias gave a subtle nod. That was all she needed. With a sudden, powerful push from her hind legs, Leora leapt into the air. The crowd gasped. Her wings beat furiously at first, struggling against gravity, wobbling dangerously. Some shouted warnings, expecting her to crash. But Elias had anticipated every movement, every falter. "Steady, steady," he murmured, guiding her with a combination of training, trust, and unseen mechanisms that helped her maintain balance. Slowly, her wing strokes grew stronger, more confident. She rose higher, a fragile silhouette against the morning sky. The arena fell silent. No laughter, no mocking, only the sound of wind slicing through the air as Leora soared above them. Higher and higher, twisting and turning with increasing grace. The human had done what no one had believed possible. He had taken a broken, crippled dragon and brought her into the sky. Then, with a sudden, breathtaking turn, Leora banked sharply, diving and circling with effortless fluidity. The crowd erupted, a mix of shock, awe, and disbelief. Their laughter had died, replaced by astonished cheers. The albino dragon that everyone had ridiculed was flying, not just surviving, but dominating the sky above them. Elias watched from the platform, heart pounding but calm, his mind already calculating the next steps. This first flight was more than a success. It was proof that human ingenuity, determination, and trust could achieve what brute strength and magic could not. Leora returned to the platform, landing gracefully, wings folding like a cathedral's arch. She shook her head, sending droplets of morning dew scattering, and gazed at Elias with a quiet pride. The bond between them had grown stronger with each beat of her wings, each whispered instruction, each step forward in the shadow of doubt. And as the crowd erupted in cheers, Elias realized something profound. Today they had not just flown. They had rewritten the rules of what humans, and dragons, could achieve. The arena had never been so quiet, and yet so alive. The morning sun glittered on the pale scales of Leora, the albino dragon who had once been mocked, once ridiculed, once declared useless. Now she circled above the crowd like a ghost of defiance, wings beating with power and precision, a spectacle no one could ignore. Elias stood at the edge of the platform, chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, hand resting lightly on the dragon's neck as she returned briefly to land. Around them, spectators leaned forward, eyes wide, jaws slack. For weeks they had laughed at the human and his crippled companion. For weeks they had whispered that no human could master what nature had broken. Today, those whispers were replaced by stunned silence, then awe, then the thunderous roar of admiration. "You've done it," someone breathed from the stands. "He actually did it." Elias said nothing. Words weren't needed. Leora flexed her wings and took off again, this time performing loops and dives, arcs and spirals that tested not just her strength, but the trust and bond between dragon and mechanic. Every maneuver she made carried the grace of freedom reclaimed and the confidence of a queen reclaiming her throne. He had rebuilt her from bones, braces, and pulleys, yes, but more importantly, he had rebuilt her spirit. Her scars no longer told a story of failure. They were marks of endurance, proof that she had survived what others thought impossible. The crowd could only watch, awestruck, as she carved her dominance across the sky, a living testament to human ingenuity and determination. From the stands, the other champions shifted uncomfortably. Dragons they had trained for years, taught with magic and brute force, faltered against Leora's finesse. They had been strong, sure, but predictable. Leora was something else. She moved with intelligence, agility, and instinct tuned perfectly by Elias's careful hands. Every beat of her wings told the story of a bond stronger than mere power, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. As the sun climbed higher, Leora swooped low, circling the platform in a wide arc before landing lightly before Elias. He knelt beside her, brushing a hand down her side, feeling the muscle tone beneath the pale scales, feeling her breath warm against his fingers. Her amber eyes met his, and in that gaze was acknowledgment. They had done more than survive ridicule. They had soared above it. The crowd erupted, cheering, clapping, shouting, a sound unlike anything Elias had ever heard. For the first time in his life, humans and dragons weren't divided by fear, magic, or power. Today, they were witnesses to a partnership that transcended species, a collaboration that redefined what humans could achieve. Elias rose slowly, hand raised in acknowledgment of the cheering masses. "She's not just mine," he said softly, so only a few could hear. "She belongs to the sky now. And so do we, together." The nobles, once sneering and dismissive, now whispered in disbelief. "A human mechanic, he taught a dragon to fly," one asked. "He didn't just repair her, he transformed her." Indeed, transformed she was. Leora's wings stretched proudly as she rose again, spinning and twisting like a living crown above the arena. She was no longer a crippled albino dragon. She was the sky's queen, and the human who had dared to challenge fate was now her equal in legend. As the day ended and shadows stretched across the arena, Elias and Leora stood together on the platform, surveying the amazed crowd. The story of the useless dragon and the human mechanic would spread far and wide. From ridicule to triumph, from weakness to unmatched strength, they had rewritten the rules of the world. And in the skies above, Leora soared, a queen not only of dragons but of defiance, of courage, and of a bond that no one could ever break.